There's craziness.
It's a unique city. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's great to meet you, man. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, you bet. And before I want to cover, since it's Jazz Appreciation Month in April,
Yeah,
I want to get
sure.
into your work that you're doing. But before that, I want to ask, we're looking at April of 2024. 4 years ago, this pandemic began and really changed everything for all of us.
Crazy. Yeah.
How did you get through that and how did it change you?
Personally,
Just, I think the Venn diagram kind of bleeds together, but just overall, like, what was that time period like for you to get through it?
yeah, it's so interesting. I haven't reflected on that in a little while. Just time goes by so quickly.
Yeah.
I remember on March 13th, I brought my team together. There are around, I guess at the time, maybe 10 or 11 of us. There are now 15 of us. And I said, listen, there seems to be this virus going around. I think we should shut things down and go home, probably for 2 weeks. But let's just stay in constant contact and let's make sure our customers and our clients know that we're still here for them, but we're going to have to do things a little differently. Well, I don't think I was unique when I gave that message. But little did we know that it was going to be like a good 12 to 18 months of change.
Yeah.
And what we did is we came up with this like moniker in terms of what we stood for. We talked about the fact that we are going to be present, we're going to be factual, we will not retreat, we will be reaching out. So some just general modes of operations in terms of how we were going to show up for each other and how we were going to show up for our clients. And then we basically kicked into gear around doing free sessions for any organization in New Orleans who was struggling. So we started with our clients saying, okay, listen, this is going to be different now. And the more we learn, the more confusion we have. We just need to ensure that we're able to pivot. New Orleans is nothing if not resilient. We're used to like crises on an ongoing basis. So this is maybe a new flavor of a hurricane of sorts,
Yeah.
but with a lot less familiarity and a lot less understanding around the implications short-term and long-term. So how do we make sure our clients were secure? How do I make sure first and foremost my team was secure and that they were feeling okay? Because we have families and kids, and like my son was graduating high school, and like what does
Yeah.
that look like? So it's all coming at you. Um, the good news is New Orleans is a hot city. So we had the outside, whereas many people in the Northeast or in the colder parts of the country did not. So that allowed us to have more meetings outside, just socially distanced and the like. But it gave us a little bit more flexibility in terms of how we do what we do. But we went virtual really quickly, making sure the team was secure and the team was focused, making sure our clients understood, and then quickly opening up services for New Orleans because that's who we are. New Orleans is a city that cares. It's a city that is there for each other. It's a city that's resilient, an overused word, but in this case, it's really meaningful. And a city that wants to help others. And that's how we framed it. That's how we launched into the pandemic. Again, with this mindset of we're not going to retreat, we're going to be present, we're going to be factual, and we're going to really care about the community. And then probably within the next 3 months, we migrated everything to virtual.
Yeah.
And we really didn't miss a beat because the engagements changed. What we do is we do strategic planning and systems coordination work for purpose-driven organizations. So for the impact of Trepwise, we are an impact-driven firm, and our goal is to maximize the impact of organizations and create thriving communities that are nourished by good ideas. And we believe that good ideas can come from anywhere and anyone. So this was the period, where you are tested and you are there to say, okay, what do we need to do to ensure that your organization is stable and can be sustained? So we shifted from like the long-term strategic planning work that we were doing for our clients and shifted to much more short-term crisis management work. We created workshops, online workshops for people to come to think through how they communicate. Our primary audiences in terms of our clients are nonprofits, because we focus on purpose-driven organizations. So that's often a nonprofit, often foundations, and often corporate social responsibility programs of for-profit organizations. But when we actually did our free services for the community, we would work with anyone, like any organization. Often say like New Orleans is filled with bankers and lawyers and candlestick makers, and the candlestick makers are really important for our economy, these small businesses.
Yeah.
So we shifted and provided some services to small businesses as well, just to make sure that everyone was like as stable as possible.
When I think about the scope and breadth of this country, how big and how many places there are, I didn't even factor in that New Orleans is quite resilient. That you all are used to getting pounded by Mother Nature. And you know what I'm saying? And I always
And we
remember
and
one
we
report.
stand up and we dust ourselves
That's
off.
it. And yeah, get rid of the water and go for it. And the thing I remember after Katrina happened, I remember all the analysts would get on TV and go through how did this happen and what are we doing? And I
Totally.
always remember every time at the end of a report, they're always like, New Orleans is not a natural place. It's below sea level. But
That's
you
been
guys have always historically been okay. I mean,
yes.
from a geographical, from an Earth standpoint,
Right.
you're already behind the blocks, but somehow you've become one of the more eclectic, more recognizable, fun places, productive
Right.
places on the planet.
That is, I thank you for commenting on that and for observing that, and for naming that.
Yeah.
It is really, it's true. I think New Orleans learns a lot from its crisis management, from its resilience. I think we've learned to be very innovative. We've learned to be very agile. We're nothing if not flexible. I often say. I think the pandemic showed us that, but I also think the idea after Katrina, people came to New Orleans with flocks of people came. New money was flooding in. New nonprofits were being established. I think more nonprofits per capita than any city in the United States. People wanted to save the city. People wanted to learn from what happened. And that mindset had always been there. Like this resilience mindset's always been there, but boy, was it really accentuated because you had an influx. Usually with the hurricanes, it was eating away at the core of New Orleans. So with every hurricane, you may lose people to Houston or Atlanta or Birmingham or Little Rock who just like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. The city would shrink in size because of the hurricanes. Katrina chopped the city by like 40%. Um, chop the city in terms of residents by 40%. However, the influx of people who wanted to come and help rebuild New Orleans was really very, very real.
Yeah.
So instead of a crisis only shrinking the city, this crisis also enhanced the city. And
Yeah.
we learned how to be really innovative. So I would argue right now, thanks to Tulane University and the Water Institute at New Orleans and lots of different nonprofits like CRCL focuses on coastal restoration, we have learned to live with water in a really innovative way.
Absolutely.
Because of the influx of people who wanted to help and the influx of nonprofits, there's a huge community of nonprofit culture who really want to help the city.
Yeah.
So I think that came from Katrina, and I think it's just been built upon year over year.
The
It's
people
amazing
that
we're going to be celebrating 15 years soon.
yeah, it's weird too. It just seems like it just happened. I
Right.
always felt bad for the little girls that were named Katrina. Like someone was gonna have to say, you got to rename this kid, man. This can't happen.
Yeah, and
Just you
I
can't.
do my I do I when I meet people whose name is Katrina, I pause just for a moment.
Ah,
Like, there's a lot of beauty in that name as well. So
right, absolutely there is. Yeah, 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 tongue in cheek. Um, so I want to get to the brass tacks of what you do on a daily basis. You know, as a
sure.
founder and a CEO of a consulting firm,
Yeah.
I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day, and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
We help organizations be the best that they can possibly be. So you see the school that you're sitting in? Do you see your teacher that's helping you every single day? We want to make sure that this school is the best school in the world. We want to make sure that this teacher is the strongest teacher that you've ever been exposed to. We want to make sure that you personally, third grader, are thriving. And our organization helps organizations like that thrive. And what we do is we help build strategies. So, what's a strategy? Strategy is just a way of achieving a predefined goal. So, third grader, what is your goal for this year? You want to learn how to read really, really well. So, let's put in a strategy that's going to help you read. Let's train your teachers to help them teach you how to read as best as possible. Let's make sure we have diversified books and reading programs and tapes and visuals that you can use. And let's make sure that we're checking in with you to make sure that we're making progress on those strategies. So it's no different from an individual perspective. How do you make a third grader thrive? To how do you make an executive director of a nonprofit thrive? Versus how you make that nonprofit itself as impactful as possible. And from there, how do you make systems as powerful as possible too? Because systems are just a group of organizations. So I start with the third grader because we're very human centered. And what does that mean? What that means is we're the consulting organization that puts humans in the center of everything that we do. We're the organization that will start with org structure and job descriptions before we start with finances. Most consultants will come in and say, show me your finances and I'll tell you how stupid you are and how you need to fire everyone. That is not who we are. We are much more about this is a people run organization. We believe that organizations are constantly in motion. They're either moving forward, they're moving backwards, or they're moving sideways. And that motion is driven by people. So let's understand who the stakeholders are in this ecosystem that we're working in. Let's understand how these stakeholders engage and interact with whatever organization we're working with. And let's make sure that we can align them around a common vision and a common mission and a common value system to allow you to achieve what you want to achieve in the near term and in the longer term. So we'll start with that third grader. That's the human-centered approach for a school. Let's understand what the students think and how the students are doing. Let's talk to teachers. Let's talk to parents. Let's talk to administration. Let's talk to the community. And then from those conversations, we then begin building the plan that's going to help them maximize their impact going forward.
What did you want to be when you were in that seat as a third grader?
Oh, wow, man. I had a really bad speech impediment when I was little, so I was unable to say R's and S's and T's, and it was really interesting. The when you're, I'm from a different generation, they didn't understand dyslexia, they didn't understand speech
Yeah.
impediment, really just didn't understand. So, but what they did understand was labeling. So I was labeled quickly as a slow child. And I remember they said to my parents, so the story goes, that don't expect much from me, but I'm a very sweet little boy. And my parents were like, I don't think so. So they pulled me out of a school and put me in a new school and got me a speech therapist. So when I was in third grade, I wanted to be understood.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be made fun of. I just wanted to be part of the norm, you
Yeah.
know? So I had to really focus on my speech.
Yeah.
From there, though, I love people and I'm very much of that extrovert. So I get my energy working with and through people. And that's been a pattern in my entire life. So whether I was class president of my eighth grade class or whether I was student body president of my high school, that was always like a thing. And I thought that maybe I would go into politics, maybe. How can I help people was kind of like my genre. I want to do something that's going to make an impact. I went to Dartmouth College undergrad, which is a college up in New Hampshire and pretty small college. And I was a government major. Again, maybe I'd go to law school. And an economics double. I found that to be interesting. And I ended up going to Procter and Gamble in Cincinnati and started my career in packaged goods. And I learned a whole lot about like human-centered work, even though they didn't call it human-centered work like that. Back then they called it target audience and understanding who your target audience was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I learned a whole lot there. And then from there, I went to Harvard Business School and then moved into financial services. So I spent 20 years in financial services, and I'm going to get to the answer in your question in one
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. Sure.
So my financial services career was great. I kept putting my head down and I kept working hard and doing well and getting promoted and then working hard and doing well and getting promoted. I really didn't have to think about my path. I was on a path and I just like did what I was supposed to do. And I ended up running a financial services organization from a distribution perspective, ended up selling it to a firm in New York City. Then I cycled out of that contract. And then my wife, who was born and brought up in New Orleans, said, why don't we move to New Orleans? There could be some cool opportunities there. Most of our married life had been in Boston. So when I arrived in New Orleans, my wife said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, you know what? I don't know. She said, maybe early retirement. I'm like, too young for that. And I would be bored out of my mind. Let me just explore. And I began exploring the city and I began meeting people. And New Orleans is like, thank you for moving here. This was 4 years after Katrina. So they're all saying, thank you for moving here, which I thought was like, that's kind, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe a little odd, but whatever. And then, but they would introduce you to new people, and every person you met would introduce you to 5 new people. So it was really easy to network in the city. In Boston, it's a much larger ecosystem. It's a much more complex ecosystem. It's hard to get anywhere, both literally and metaphorically. So this open community, if you wanted to help, just raise your hand, was really intriguing to me.
Yeah.
And then I began talking to different nonprofits. I began talking to the Community Foundation. And the Community Foundation said to me, would you consider helping us look at our portfolio of nonprofits to see whether they would be sustainable? And I said, well, I don't really have a nonprofit history. I sit on boards, but I've never worked for a nonprofit. And they're like, exactly. We want your business acumen applied to the nonprofit ecosystem. So Trepwise was born. And I share that story because when I got to New Orleans, I had no path. I
Yeah.
had been on a path for 20 years. And now I'm like, what do I want to do? I remember going to my Harvard Business School reunions, and they would say to me, you're in financial services? You're still there? And trying not to be insulted. I was like, yeah, I'm still there. I do like the
Yeah.
business management side of the house, but yeah, I'm still there. But you know what? I understand that question because knowing me and I asked you, where would you put me? You would not have put me in financial services.
Yeah.
So I had a career that was a very exciting and great career, and I'm very blessed for it. And it was not a career with intent. And when I got to New Orleans, it was much more intentional. Like what I wanted to do, I was making decisions. It wasn't about my title, it wasn't about my salary, it wasn't about my breadth of power. It literally was, what do I want to do? So the last 14 years in New Orleans has been such a transformational moment for me personally to really be able to help one organization at a time. I often say if you can change one person's life, it was worth the trip. And I have the luxury of being it to get to do the work I get to do, working with some amazing individuals, amazing organizations in an amazing city who just constantly wants to make themselves better. New Orleans has challenges. Every city does. New Orleans talks about their challenges. New Orleans lives with their challenges. Many cities don't. And I think it allows us to be a lot more fluid and allows us to really try to help make a difference. And
I
that, if I was a third grader and you asked me that question, I think my answer should have been, I want to make the best impact I can make in my life. It just took me a while to get there.
Yeah. Well, I get from a lot of musicians that live there that they when they get to New Orleans, if they're not natives, they kind of climb into the soul of everything. There's this more palpable
Yeah,
heartbeat that they didn't get in another city. You know what I'm saying?
true.
And
So
and
true.
and then there's a more transparent thing. So I want to get into the jazz question, but I want to give you a little trivia real quick because you're in a jazz town.
Yeah, sure.
Kansas City was one of the
Yep.
longest running towns to have live entertainment until COVID happened because of Pendergast and the whole Prohibition era. We were roaring through the 20s. So when we
Yep.
closed down, we were one of the longest standings. And when they told me that, I'm thinking New Orleans, I'm thinking these other hubs, New York, but everybody closed down and went dry. But not us. We had the Mob Boss and Pendergast running the show. So the liquor was flowing, jazz was playing, you know. So
Right.
it
I mean,
was
it's interesting. Kansas City's also got a more diversified economy than New Orleans does. The pandemic really, really significantly negatively impacted the city.
wow.
Because you think about like tourism, 18 to
Yeah,
20 million people come here every single year.
yeah,
They come here for some key reasons. They come here for the infrastructure, like the French Quarter and the architecture and the culture of it all. They come for the food because we're a very foodie city. We've got more
yeah.
restaurants per capita than any city in the country. They
Oh,
come for
wow.
the music. They
Yeah,
come for the jazz musicians. They come for the street performers. They come for Mardi Gras. They come for Jazz Fest. We have 300 plus festivals every single year that attract people. All of that was shut down.
yeah,
So, and we did not have the infrastructure human wise to support the restaurant industry the way it was built. The
yeah.
restaurant industry was built with 18 to 20 million people coming to town every single
Hmm.
year.
Mhm.
So like how could we really try to help sustain those types of organizations? So much creativity was happening. Again, we live in a warm city, so that gave us flexibility. So much innovation was done about eating outside and how the city was helping giving permits really quickly, how musicians would play outside, how musicians would go online and begin building their brands on social media, how they would go to house parties and play in driveways. It was actually amazingly moving to see how the city transformed when other cities would have just shut down.
Yeah.
Other cities could have just crawled into a hole.
Yep.
I think the beauty of hurricanes, we're like, okay, we need to reimagine how we do this. We need to do it differently.
Yep.
But with that said, I don't want to be Pollyannish about it. It was significantly challenging for the organization
Yeah. So
and the city.
yeah, for sure. So you're a high octane kind of guy. What's who's been a hero for you, an inspiration for you?
Hero for me. Just in life in general.
Yeah, just somebody that's
Yeah.
really fueled you for because you're
Oh,
very high achieving. Who's been kind of a fuel for you?
Walter Isaacson is an amazing human being, and I've had the pleasure and the privilege of getting to know him because he works at Tulane. And for those who don't know him immediately, he's a classical historian. He teaches history at Tulane, and he writes some incredible biographies, from Da Vinci right through to Elon Musk, most recently, back to Benjamin Franklin. And he's brilliant, like literally brilliant, but he really cares. And he could go anywhere and do anything. He used to run, I think it was at Sony. I should know that. Then he ran the no, it was Turner. I think he ran Turner for a long time. And then the news now, CNN, he ran CNN for a while. Then he ran the Aspen Institute. And like I saw his, and then he became this like just deep historian because that's what he loved to do. And then became this author because he wanted to tell stories. And he could go anywhere and do anything. He's that type of guy. Um, he's choosing New Orleans and he's choosing to teach at Tulane when he doesn't need to teach anywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
he's an icon, but he's decided to teach at Tulane. He was born and brought up here. Okay, so this is
Okay.
home. And the fact that he, with all of his prestige and all of his honor, he got the Medal of Honor from the President of the United States. I mean, the guy is like, the guy's really accomplished. The fact that he would want to come home and give back is just inspiring.
Yeah.
And I am in no way, shape, or form in his category of accomplishment. Let me be clear. But I look at his category of accomplishment and I'm inspired by it. And I'm
Yeah.
inspired about how he's using it to give back to the community. So, for example, I said New Orleans is all about festivals. And one of the newest festivals is called Book Fest, which is sponsored at Tulane University. But it brings authors from all around the world down to New Orleans. And we just had it in March. It's the third year. He is the chair of that with Cheryl Landry, who's Mitch Landry's wife, who was the former mayor here. Both of them have designed this new festival. It's skyrocketed. You might have heard of it by now. And it's like the number of authors, the number of interviewers, the number of media that were here was just amazing. And to see how he's using his celebrity to draw intelligence and intellect and academics to New Orleans in the form of a festival is a brilliant concept.
Yeah.
Because you think of festivals, you got Jazz Fest and you got French Quarter Fest, and all of which are beautiful and wonderful. But their music and their food and their drinks and their community and they're wonderful and they're aspirational and they're different than an academic festival.
Yeah.
And I don't think people expected out of New Orleans would come such an academic festival.
Yeah. Yeah. So of all of these things that you've done in your life, all of the evolution and achievement, what are you the proudest of?
I have three amazing children, and I have an amazing wife. And we've been married 34 years. And I am most proud of my family and like how we are resilient and how we can adapt and how my son was the son of 2020, my middle son. I have three boys. My oldest is 27, my middle is 23, and my youngest is 21. Um, the middle son was the kid of 2020, where he graduated high school in 2020, he started college in 2020, and it was about as screwed up as possible. Um, Seeing, and then my older son got furloughed, and then my youngest son was like, "Am I going to school for my senior year in high school?" So there was just a lot of what families dealt with, but we're not unique in that space. But what I'm most proud of is how they took those challenges and just adapted, kind of like the city in which they live,
Yeah.
to kind of maximize the experience. And I could not be prouder of them. And if there's one thing that I did in this world right, is with my wife, I brought these three boys into the world, and I think they're going to do gangbusters.
Well said. So at the end of the day, Kevin, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm someone who really cares, and I take life very seriously. Um, I do a daily reflection every day, and it's based on gratitude, because I think it's easy to lose sight of gratitude. I often say it's not the lions, tigers, and bears that get you, it's the gnats and the flies. So how do I get the gnats and the flies away? How do I deal with the lion, tigers, and bears in a way that's mission aligned with who I am as an individual? The fact that I've been able to build this organization with an amazing team that I have that really wants to make a difference in community, that is who I am, literally.
Yeah.
When I was president of a distribution company in financial services, not really who I am. It's what I did. It's what I did. And I have the luxury in my life right now to actually do who I am. And if that's what I'm remembered by, as I said, if we've helped change one person's life, it was worth the trip, then that's what I'm probably most proud about who I am.
So we get off this call, a New Orleans time machine pulls up in front of your house, and you can go back in New Orleans history and see one event with your own eyes. Where are you going? I can tell you where I'm
I would
going.
go, I would go back. This oh, there's oh God. I have two responses to that.
Okay.
My first response is I would go back to the World's Fair that I think occurred here in 1985 or 86, because my wife, who was born and brought up here on her off terms we both went to Dartmouth, that's where we met. On her off term, came back to New Orleans and worked in the World Fair making funnel cakes.
Wow.
And I would do anything to be a customer at her booth watching her make a funnel cake. I think it would just make the rest of my life. Um, the second thing that I would like to go back to is when I would, this is like a relive moment, actually, because I was actually there for it. When Bruce Springsteen came to Jazz Fest, and I introduced my son, my oldest son at the time, who might have been 16-ish, who really didn't know who Bruce Springsteen was. And I introduced him to the Bruce Springsteen moment. And because I'm from New Jersey originally, I'm a Jersey boy.
Okay.
And Bruce Springsteen was my first concert when I was 13 years old. And the fact that I was able to introduce my oldest son to Bruce Springsteen in the Jazz Fest environment was such a fantastic moment for me that
Yeah.
I would love to relive that.
It's amazing how many people they pulled down there that aren't jazz people. Like Billy Joel's done it. There's
Oh
just a
yeah.
lot. So I used to work at a
Incredible.
YMCA. That's how I got into the nonprofit world. I ran computer labs for a couple of inner city YMCA's, and there
That's
was a
awesome.
guy that worked at the front desk. This was in the early 2000s, and he used to always tell me, "Whatever you do, go see Bruce Springsteen live. Don't even
Yeah.
think about it. All right, you
Don't
just
even
get a
think.
ticket when he's in
Nope.
town. Go."
Yep.
I
Yep.
haven't done it yet, and
Oh,
I
you're
need to.
kidding. Okay, so he's getting up there.
Yeah,
He's getting up there. I'm pushing too, so let's be clear.
we're all
Uh,
pushing.
but but I was 13 when he was performing, okay? Just
Yeah,
to give perspective on that. It's time to see him.
I need to.
When we saw him here, a 3-hour show. The guy's given
Yeah,
when I saw him back in Asbury Park in New Jersey, it was a 3-hour show. The guy doesn't let up. The guy doesn't let up.
he's a beast.
Absolutely worth it. I would travel someplace. If you've never seen him before, I would travel someplace to see him.
Yeah, he comes here to Kansas City. So the next time he comes in, I'm gonna grab the ticket. So before we get out of this proverbial digital door here, how can people hire you, learn more about you,
Yes.
anything about the world that you're in? What's the good business?
Oh, well, you can find us at trepwise.com. It's trepwisc.com. If you're running a nonprofit, if you're on the board of a nonprofit, if you're part of a foundation, if you're getting funded or grants from foundations, if you've gotten Mackenzie Scott money, who she's been so incredibly generous, giving millions of dollars away to many different nonprofits, it's a blessing and a curse. They need to understand how they use that kind of money. We're the organization that can come in and help you focus on your impact and help you build the strategic plan that you need to achieve it. If you're a community that's dealing with issues, whether it be issues with equity, whether it be issues with living with water, whether it be a cultural economy challenges, whether it be making sure that all youth have pathways to success, we do a lot of strategic and organizational systems planning for that. So we've done it in New Orleans, and if we can do it in New Orleans, we can do it in New York City as well.
Wonderful. Kevin, keep being a force of good, my man. I appreciate you taking a minute out today. This has been
Hey, I
wonderful.
really enjoyed meeting you. Let's talk again at some point. And
Yeah,
when
hey.
you come to New Orleans, please look me up. You have my contact information. I would love to show you around.
100%, man. We got to get that honeymoon dream. We got to get down there. So we're going to do it.
I'm telling you, we're waiting. We're waiting.
I'm going to give you a
Time to
call, man.
come.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
we'll talk soon again.